My name is Lockie Phillips, and I am a horse trainer, an instructor, a coach, an international clinician, and a horse dad. This is the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast, your pit stop in a troubled world to explore horse training that puts the horse first. You can expect controversy because, well, frankly, putting the horse first remains controversial. You can expect my opinions because I'm here to share them. You can expect facts because I'm here to share them. You can expect mistakes, and you can expect, well, humanity here because I am fundamentally a flawed human being. This place is a place for our guests and for myself to share our experiences freely and openly to help reach people just like you who have felt things or experienced things or thought things about horses that you might be afraid to speak of in other places. Here, we explore those things. This is your place to come home to horsemanship that just trains horses without saddling them with emotional baggage. Today on the podcast, we have Shelby Dennis. Shelby Dennis represents Milestone Equestrian, and she is a certified animal behavior consultant with the IAABC. Shelby has a lot of experience with horses through various different disciplines, but is most well known right now for her rich and powerful advocacy work for horses, for science-backed and empathy-driven training. And in my opinion, her uncompromising candor, strength, and calling a spade-itis, let's say, on her social media, never being afraid to back down from arguments, never being afraid to call people out if calling them out, in her opinion, is necessary from the horse's point of view. She is someone I respect very, very much. I believe that goes both ways. I've been on her podcast twice, and this is, I think, her second visit to my podcast. So if you don't know Shelby, I hope you enjoy getting to know her. And if you do know Shelby, I hope you enjoy this interview, which I actually did several months ago. So Shelby, if you're listening, thank you for your patience in allowing me to, record ahead and publish slowly. Thanks. I hope you enjoy. Shelby Dennis, hello. How are you?
Hello.
Thank you for joining me.
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Well, this is your first time on my podcast. I've been on yours once before, and we've visited bits and pieces here and there, but I like to ask everyone three very big questions to begin. Who are you, Shelby? What do you do? And how do you do it?
Those are three very big questions. I would say hi, I'm Shelby Dennis. I live in British Columbia, Canada, and I've grown up around horses. I started out handling horses very differently from how I do now, and I grew up showing on the Arabian horse circuit, which has a lot of abuse that I think kind of goes under the radar more than other areas because of it being a breed circuit. So I was in a big echo chamber. So the question of who I am is an interesting one because I'd say that who I am now is very different than who I used to be, and I didn't know who I was before. And I've kind of been going through this journey alongside of horses, self-discovering and figuring out who I am, where my values lie, and how I want to approach things. What I do is I do train horses professionally. I'm an IAABC certified equine behavior consultant, but I've also gotten very involved in welfare advocacy lately. And have taken a little bit more of a step back from training horses the last few years. And I'm kind of re-emerging in that field because I found more so like 3 to 5 years ago that I was in a position where I felt I had to kind of throw out my own morals and ethics in order to retain certain clients. And I wanted to make that shift of my program more solid. So I had to take a break and I was really burnt out. And now I'm kind of figured out a path that's more in alignment with where I want to go. So my end goal is to help improve horse welfare across the industry, but prioritizing competitive horse sports because I find that that's where we see the most welfare issues that are highlighted in the public eye. and it kind of sets the tone for everyone else, whether or not they show. So that's been a major priority for me. And sorry, what was the third question? Those are the first two.
How do you do it?
Okay. I would say I use a lot of rewards-based training and kind of I want to try to pair like an intuitive approach with a scientific one because I think there's merit to both. Like I think that we're kind of in a weird shift in the horse world where there's two very polarizing viewpoints and then like a bunch of different shades between those two viewpoints. So a lot of what I've done has been taking a scientific approach into horse training and learning about how it impacts the horse's brain and when we're training, but also talking about intuitive and I'd say I really like what you do with your whole branding and your name being emotional horsemanship. I think is really it's on the ball for like what people need to be doing because I think we underestimate how much our emotions and how we show up impacts our training of our horses. And that's also been a huge portion of changing the way that I do things is trying to regulate myself and become more self-aware of my own feelings and emotions because you can't show up well for horses when you're not regulated. Um, so I would say my cat just bumped the microphone. I'm
Oh,
not sure. Go
I've
ahead.
got 3 cats here, and it could become bedlam at any
Okay,
moment. So
perfect.
don't worry about that.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say like I've been trying to with my oh my gosh. 1 second. Sorry,
Yeah.
my cat just played something on my computer. He stepped on my keyboard. Okay, we're good. Um, I would say that I've been trying to kind of pair the human approach of like focusing on how the person shows up to with their horse to actually training the horses. Because I would argue some of the bigger problems that we experience are related to us and how we are doing things, and the horse is just there. They're not really the issue, it's people. So um I'm trying to pair the human experience with how we train horses and just reflecting on the world as a whole and how it influences our own behavior and how we show up for horses. Because I think all of that stuff is interconnected. That was a very long-winded way of just basically saying that I think that in order to train horses well, it requires like self-reflection, learning about the horse and their behavior, but then also recognizing our world as a whole and how everything is kind of stitched together to influence our own behavior and how we perceive things.
Wow. So you're like kind of busy or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think I spent a lot of time thinking about things, and
Me
that
too.
it's a good thing and a bad thing.
Me too. So
Yeah.
I know that you just moved into a new place recently.
Yeah, yeah. I moved in September and it's been good because I already knew the people who I lived with that they were my clients. So that's good because it was already a place that's like really in alignment with the way I do things. Like all of their horses here are barefoot. They have a track system and it's a nice gated property. So it's quite a bit safer than some of the places I was at before because some of them were like right on the road and I don't like having the horses areas set right on a road, especially a busy one. And like the more I've gotten into advocacy, the more I've kind of worried about like if someone did want to come mess with my horses, they could if they're right there. So it feels a lot safer. And I like it better because I live in the Pacific Northwest and rain is a huge problem here. So having really good aggregate footing and like better drainage is such a benefit. So it's been good, but like moving horses, which I'm sure you know, because I know you moved it sucks. Getting set up and moving a bunch of horses is so much work. It's the worst.
Well, we're still in the setup phase here because we just bought a virgin piece of land and we're still setting it up, still surfacing the track, still getting everything in place. It's exhausting. I'm ready for it to be over. I'm ready to get back to work properly, but I still have to work while I'm doing all that setup. It's really exhausting. Are you
Your
sort of,
place looks amazing though. It looks like
thank
it's
you.
coming together really
It is
nicely.
it's coming together, but I'm ready for the major projects to be over and that we sort of switch into
Yeah.
maintenance because there's big work to do in our industry. Don't you agree?
Oh yeah. I think that the horse industry is kind of at a crossroads right now where it needs to
Okay.
get
So,
aligned, I guess.
well, could we talk a little bit more in depth about that?
Yeah, for sure.
So, if we're at a crossroads, what roads have we come from and what were they now that they're
The way
crossing?
the way that I see it is like if we go really far back, like horses being used as work animals and in war and stuff has influenced how we view them as animals in comparison to like a dog. So I think that even though they're not being used for that anymore and they're being used for pleasure and competition, a lot of people's perspectives on horse training are still coming through a lens where it's like you have to make the horse do something because the stakes were way higher. If you couldn't get to work and you couldn't feed your family, or if you were going to die in war if the horse didn't cooperate, you had to make them do that. And that makes sense. But a lot of our training and competition has evolved through that lens. So we're coming from a place where a lot of people's value systems with horses and what they view as like being a good trainer is coming through the lens of being able to make them do something without necessarily reflecting on how you achieved that result. And then the on the other side, like the crossroads that is kind of coming here now is letting the horse have more choice, consent, being more considerate of the horse's experience and how the training methods we use and the training equipment we use might impact them. And those two lenses are in opposition with each other. So I find that it's created a lot of tension in the horse world where people can feel caught in the middle because it's hard to shift from one paradigm to the other. And like I am intimately familiar with that feeling because I came from a place where I grew up being taught like that when a horse does something bad, the only option you have is to hit them and punish them. And like I truly for a long time in my riding career, I didn't know that there were alternatives to discourage unwanted behavior without being aggressive with the horse. So then when I was met with the opposing mindset where people were like hitting horses is bad, that's not ethical, I felt really attacked initially because I couldn't think of a different way. And I was stuck in this really rigid mindset where it was all about like dominance and forcing the horse to do what you want and less about partnership. And I think that's really what it comes down to is that we have a lot of people who have a dominance mindset where in order to feel like a successful rider or trainer, they have to make the horse do something. And if they can't, it's viewed as a weakness. And I think that's such an unhealthy mindset to be in, even just for the person without considering how the horse feels. You feel like a failure when you can't get something done on that day instead of reflecting and being like, hey, I'm working with a living creature that has a mind of its own. And it's not always going to be a situation where I can force a result. And so we're at a crossroads where it's like we have people who are still really rooted in that dominance mindset. And then we have people who are really all for the consent based mindset where you're being more considerate of the horse. And I think there's extremes on both sides because I do think that if we're being realistic with horses, it's kind of like if you have children, you do want to be considerate of their feelings and consent and allowing them to make choices, but there are situations where you do need to make decisions for them. So there's a lot of nuance. And I think that we're at a stage now where there's a lot of defensiveness and it's hard to get that nuance across sometimes. And it can create a lot of fighting.
Well, how do you handle the public facing issues as you advocate for horses? Because as you just alluded to, this crossroads and the difficulty that we have to actually get to the nuance which is so desperately required is gatekept by this aggressive and defensive and hostile behavior from one camp to another, one person to another. How do you handle that communication in
I
your
try
work?
to share a lot about my mistakes and like my past photos of me riding in ways that I now don't view as acceptable because I find that that helps people realize that I'm not coming from a place where it's like, hey, I'm so much better than you because I do things this way now, but it's like, hey, I used to be just like you and I used to support these things and my mind has been changed and here's why. And I also try to make a point like when you are talking about specific riders, I don't think it's fair to target amateur riders, really. Like, I think that we should be sticking to people who are serving as role models in the community and are competing at an elite level because they're the ones who are influencing everyone else. And I think that they have a higher standard to uphold when it comes to being a role model. So, when we are looking at stuff like that, I think that if we're talking about like junior and amateur riders, it should be very general and vague where you're not picking on specific people unless it's like your past self and you're using your own photos. And when we're talking about elite level riders, I think that through that lens, it's like criticize the behavior and the training methodologies. Don't criticize the person as a whole if you can avoid it, because the actual issues like the behavior and what they're continuing to condone, and that is all subject to change. If at any point someone stops and goes, hey, I was wrong, that's great. That's exactly what we're looking for if you're trying to bring change. If they can admit that they're wrong and self-reflect, then that's showing that there's change. I think that the biggest issue is when people double down and continue to defend things and refuse to consider any level of self-reflection, and that's when it gets dangerous. But there needs to be room for that openness to change and not being so rigid and like being caught up in the end result that we want to see, where we want to like the finish line that you want people to get to, which really there is none, because growth isn't a finish line. But we need to recognize the fact that like to meet people where they are and do our best to be supportive of that without not without making it so that we don't hold them accountable, because I think accountability is really important for growth, and that as a community the industry isn't very good at holding people accountable, and the fault for that lies with like the governing organizations like the FEI, because the fact that these upper level riders can even do what they're doing, they're being allowed to do that by the people that are in charge. And if that were addressed, they wouldn't be able to get away with publicly behaving and handling horses in the way that they are. But I think a really important thing is to talk about, hey, like most of the people who are training a certain way now didn't always do things this way, even if they weren't as aggressive as some people. Like most of us have made shifts and changes as we've learned more about horses, and like that's part of the process, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, because I find there's a lot of shame in admitting that that we're wrong in the horse world, where people feel like it takes away from your value and your knowledge as a horse person, when really I would say one of the best things someone can do is admit when they're wrong, and it's a huge sign that they're a safe person, in my opinion.
Well, I've heard this sentiment. It's not my sentiment. I don't support or uphold this sentiment, but I've heard this kind of reply to what you just spoke to from elite riders, saying something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I'm a horse rider. I'm not running for public office. I have had no media training. I've had no public relations training. That's not part of my job description. I'm not beholden to my advertisers to have a certain public relations, something beyond, this, and this. It's not in a contract with me anywhere. I haven't signed any contract, nor do I consent to any kind of broad spectrum community agreement that I am now a role model. I am a rider and a horse person and a trainer, and that's what I do. Why am I being expected to be a role model? Why don't you all go look at yourself and make your own individual decisions and stop bullying me? That's kind of what
Yeah.
we hear sometimes. It's not my point of view. I'm just giving voice to
Yeah.
the reply, the rebuttal. What would you say to that?
I can see where they're coming from in that, like, becoming a very good rider, you don't necessarily always see where you're going to end up. So then you can end up under the spotlight and being looked at by everyone and judged by everyone, and it can feel unfair. But I do think that it's part and parcel of having that career choice. And I would also argue, like, even in public office, we're not very good at holding politicians accountable for their behavior and making them be role models. Like, look at who's running the world. A lot of them are bad people who have done bad things, and people shrug it off. So I'd say that's a poor excuse in itself. But I would argue that they actually did agree to a contract, because if you go and look at the FEI's Horse Welfare Code of Conduct,
Right.
it's the FEI's job to uphold that, yes, but the riders are breaking it. So if you're going to these competitions and there's a written welfare code of conduct, if it's actually about what you're contractually feeling obligated to uphold, they're all already failing their horses if they're not upholding that welfare code of conduct. And with how those competitions are structured, it's honestly very hard to be a rider that actually abides by that. So I would say that, like, I understand where they're coming from. And I think that the judgment, like, I think that where it gets kind of the waters get muddied is that you can look at someone's behavior to horses and take issue with that. But what we can't really do is make sweeping statements about who they are as a whole person, generally speaking, because who they are in the barn based off of how they've been conditioned to handle horses isn't necessarily who they are outside of the barn. And you could take major issue with how someone treats their horses and then meet them in a completely different setting and realize that you are not so different. So I think that they have a point in that we shouldn't be making sweeping character judgments where we look at someone and go, you're a bad person and you always will be and you're irredeemable and this can never get better, because that's not fair. Even the worst people in the world can be subject to change. And I also think that with advocacy, it's pretty hypocritical if we approach it through the mindset of like assuming that all of these people who are currently doing unethical things will not change, because then what's the point in advocacy? The only way to fix the sport would be to clear cut everybody out of it and start fresh. The entire point of advocacy is that we have faith that these people can change, and that with more information and more pressure for these governing organizations like the FEI or USEF or Equestrian Canada to hold these riders accountable, that there will be a big shift. And that with more knowledge out there, that they will shift. So I can see where they're coming from, but I think that they missed the mark in that, like, even as like a social media influencer, once you get a lot of eyes on you, you have become a role model and you've put yourself in that role by being open with your progress online, and sharing. And I agree that they shouldn't be held to like the standard of like a public figure, like a politician, but we all have to be mindful of the fact that as soon as we're in the public eye and in a community setting, our behavior and what we advocate for affects people, even just amongst your friend groups and your families. You don't have to sign up for the role to be like a parent or someone who is actually a caretaker to have your actions impact other people. And I think that we just all need to be more mindful of, in any community setting, what we do does have impact, and we need to be aware of that and considerate of it. And I think that it's a bit of a cop out to try to be like, oh, well, my actions don't matter because I didn't sign up for this, because it's like they do matter, and the horses don't have a voice. So that's why other people need to speak out for them when it comes to welfare concerns. Otherwise, they would have no means of any protection.
I don't think they're believing that their actions don't matter. I think that it's possible that they're alluding to, my actions should not matter to you and to
Yeah.
everybody. My actions matter to my trainers, my community, my local people, my relationship to the FEI, my relationship to the governing bodies. That's what I'm beholden to. They don't want to sign a social contract in regards to their riding, and I can understand how they would think that way. I don't necessarily agree.
Yeah.
I've kind of personally, Shelby, given up expecting that any change is going to come from the top down.
Yeah.
I've given that up. I wish I knew you in 2021 properly. Do you remember Saint Boy?
Yeah. Yeah. That was
So
awful.
I saw 3 days of the equestrian sport at the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, and I was flying off the handle. I
Yeah.
was ready to just burn it all down, and I was out on social media asking someone to come and have a conversation with me on the record in the public eye about it. This is before I had a podcast, before I had anything going on. And one by one, my colleagues abandoned me alone to that conversation. I even had someone say, I don't want to alienate my clients who are aspirational or currently competing lower level dressage riders. I don't want to alienate them by being critical of their idols. And it hurts my bottom line to discuss it. The next week, the Saint Boy thing happened, and now everyone's talking about it. And I tried to talk a little bit about it last year at the Olympics, but I mostly left poking that bear alone. I think I've poked enough bears. When you've had death threats, you realize, okay, it's time
Yeah.
to stop poking so many bears, instead just stay on my own platform.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, people get really the Saint Boy thing I think blew up so much too because that rider wasn't well known as a rider, so she was easier to attack, and it was awful. So I'm not condoning what she did, but I do think that she was an easier target to use as a martyr because she wasn't like well known in the equestrian community. Whereas if
She
we
wasn't
had like
even with the FEI. She was under the pentathlon.
exactly, so like and she's like a nobody. People are like, oh, she's not a real rider. Which I feel like she got a level of criticism that was actually kind of unfounded, because I would say the fault for her behavior is largely applicable to trainers and people who are coaching someone to behave in that way. Then you put them in a high stress environment where they react that way. And she still should have known better. So not condoning the behavior, but I do feel bad for the amount of vitriol she got, because I can only imagine how many threats to her physical health and just in general that she would have received because of how much people freaked out. Um, And that wasn't really fair. Like I think it's easier to target someone who's like an outsider than it is to target someone who's in the thick of like the up and up in the equestrian community.
I think that depends. It's easier to attack someone who's an outsider if you yourself have power. It's also hard to attack people at the very, very top or to criticize people at the very, very top because they have power and with one fell swoop can annihilate your career. With
100%.
one sentence on their platforms, they can annihilate careers. And so everyone's afraid of the men and women who hold the keys to the industry. And so people, especially people who are adjacent to them, don't speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've surrounded themselves with yes men, people who are too afraid to say something.
And that's really scary too, because I think that one of the things that bothers me with that whole rhetoric in the horse world and how much power they can like that fear holds over people is that it isn't just about the horses because we've had abuse scandals for people that have come out over the years, and I can only imagine how many of those are under the surface where people are too scared to speak out because of exactly what you said. And it shouldn't be a situation like that. And I know it's not specific to the horse world because we see it in like the movie industry and in politics and everything where there's people who
Gymnastics.
get in. Yeah, exactly. And it's just, it's sad that that level of like fear and also like a shame based mindset where they make someone feel ashamed of like speaking out, or they'll like just nuke your entire character and try to discredit you with whatever they can put out. Like I think there was something that happened with like Blake Lively recently with like an allegation, and then before she even came out with her allegation they were already starting on the discrediting of her so that when she did come out with it she would be less credible to some people. And it's scary because it makes it so that if you are a victim you run a huge risk speaking out. And I see why a lot of people don't, because it's, you have to kind of weigh out the pros and cons of like the likelihood that is anything I'm going to say actually matter enough to bring real change, and how is it going to negatively impact me in the process.
Have you ever received vitriol and hate online, Shelby?
Oh yeah, big time. And it varies depending on what it is. Like I'd say TikTok is pretty bad. I've gotten like assault threats from men on TikTok. And like on Facebook recently I got review bombed and like got my reviews on my page attempted to be nuked by some supporters of a barrel racer who is advocating for whipping horses repeatedly. Like Fallon Taylor, that's who I was talking about, and her fans came on my page and they tried to review bomb my page to damage my business. And I'm very aware, like if I had a smaller following and I didn't have people that support me that were willing to counter review with positive reviews, that could be very damaging to a small business.
Oh, yeah.
So and they know that like that there's these tactics that are used to try to pressure people into silence. And like partly for me that's why I speak out so much, because it's like now I've built this platform where I've done this and there's people who are on my side. And like I like there's another creator that I know that spoke out about a local Western trainer who injured a horse because of how they abused it. And the same thing happened to her where she got her reviews bombed and she needed to turn off reviews, which is something that you can do. But if you're running a business, reviews are kind of an important way to attract clientele and let them see previous clients review your service. So it shouldn't be a situation like that. Um, for me, like the threats that I have gotten, like I would say like I would handle things a lot differently if I didn't live here in Canada. If I was in the US and I was more accessible to a lot of the people who are the angriest at me, it would change the way that I would approach things. Like I do think that I have a relative level of safety and privilege because I don't have to worry about people being as armed where I live or having me be as accessible to those potential threats.
Wow. It's serious stuff.
Yeah. It is scary. And like I said, with moving to a gated property, I do feel like my horses are a lot safer than what they were at properties that were more accessible. And that has been something that I've thought about. Especially at my old place, because they were right on a relatively busy road. And if someone cut the fence, they could just like release all of my horses.
It's a big, steaming mess. It's a mess. Shelby,
Yeah.
Shelby, doesn't matter which way you slice it. It's it's like broad spectrum mess. Not saying that there's not good stuff. There's lots of good in our industry.
Hmm.
But I think that's the exception to the norm, don't you?
Yeah, I think that we've normal and like I've noticed it on a worldwide scale now too, where it's kind of increasing, but we've normalized like a certain level of disconnection from like our actions and how they impact others, where people have this mindset where they're like, I should be able to do whatever I want to whoever I want. And if I'm not directly hurting you, it doesn't matter. And even if I am, some people will try to defend that too. And it's like we do need to be mindful of how our actions impact other people and be more considerate of that because it does matter and there's sweeping effects between I've thought about it in my past too, where it's like there's moments I can remember where someone did something that was seemingly like not a big deal or like as far as being mean goes, it's not as big of a deal as it could be, but it happened to me when I was young and I still remember it to today and it impacted my behavior still today. And that has altered the way that I go about doing things because I've wondered how many times I've been the person in that story who has like led someone to having like an anxiety that's followed them into the future. So our actions matter and I wish that more people would reflect on the fact that the reason why other people care how they handle their horses is because they care about the well-being of the horse and the impact that it has on the horse and also other people who might follow suit. And it's not just about them being able to do whatever they want without consequence because it's their horse and like their life. Um, yeah.
For me, I would like to see people start to take a little bit more personal responsibility for themselves. Think on the community, sure, but eventually change can be held back by groupthink. In fact, that's
Mm-hmm.
the reason why it's being held back because people get entrenched into a group and then everyone needs to share their opinions. You have 8 people in the room, 15 opinions, and no one's making a decision to actually look at what they're doing with the animal. For me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to encourage people to look inward, not outward,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to encourage people to not be so triggered all the time. You know, you are actually
Yeah.
in control of yourself. And I was raised with the concept that no one hurts your feelings without your permission. That's easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would like to see people start to take a little bit more of that personal responsibility because at the end of the day, it comes down to what you do with your horse right now matters.
Yes, I agree. And it's also practicing what you preach and make sure it's consistent and like I think that showing the way is a really good thing to do. And I like what you said with not being triggered too, because I think that's also another thing. That's a problem online because I've done posts where I've just been like, hey, this is how my horses live. And this is why I
And
agree
someone
with
says
this.
that
And
triggers me because my horses don't live
yes.
that way. It's like,
And then they're
damn,
like mad about it. It's like this
I
if this
can't
bothers
move.
you,
Yeah,
then you need to reflect. Because also the way I look at it is like if we're posting on our own pages, anyone who doesn't like what we say or is like triggered by it, the healthy thing to do if you can't cope with that is to block the person and not look at
unfollow.
their content.
Right,
Yeah.
unfollow, unfollow. If you were in a supermarket and you're walking around a supermarket and someone comes up behind you and says, your jeans remind me of my childhood bully, and you said, okay. And they said, I don't like your jeans, they trigger me. And you went, okay. And you moved to the next aisle and you were reaching for something. And they said, didn't you hear me? Your jeans trigger me. You would say to them, please stop following me.
Yeah.
But on a social media, we have an algorithm that consistently presents material to people who are going to engage with it. And they don't care if you engage with it in a constructive or a destructive manner for you or for others. And we need to start being aware of that, that there are other people pulling the strings. I mean, I've had
Mm-hmm.
to figure out the algorithm about certain subjects. Maybe we can talk about that at another time, but around certain subjects. So I've had to stop using certain buzzwords, certain
Oh.
key words, because as soon as I wrote those words, it attracted these complete strangers who would just within minutes would just begin misbehaving on my platform. And I understand I've invited a certain level of public scrutiny by just
Mm-hmm.
showing up online, but if you saw me 5 years ago with €2 in my bank account just trying to make a living, I'm still that guy just trying to make a
Yeah.
living like everybody else. I am a small business owner. I am not trying to run for public office, and I assume a mantle of leader very, very heavily. I don't do that easily or or lightly. And so I'd like people to take a little bit more introspection and a little bit more self responsibility about not only their
Mhm.
actions, but how they behave in community.
100%. I think
There.
that like if we look at what triggers us, it's very telling.
It's like, well, why does me think you doth protest too much? Why does that trigger you? Does the shoe fit?
Usually, yeah. I remember when I used to react more that way when I was reading things about stuff that I now agree with a lot of the things that I reacted heavily to. But the reason why I was so defensive, it was not about trying to convince the person to agree with me, but trying to like garner support for my own perspective from other people in the comment section and give myself better self-esteem as a result, which really unhealthy because your
Done work.
validation for yourself shouldn't come externally.
No, and no. So, if we're looking at change in the industry, Shelby, how do you imagine that can happen? What are some of the solutions that you would propose? And when it comes to methodologies and training, what sort of solutions are you proposing? Let's take a break. Speaking of solutions that we might propose, one of the reasons why I love Shelby so much is that she is so solution driven and she's out there in her way doing as much work as she can to make solutions not only more available, but to destigmatize them as well. And I feel like I'm in the same boat as her in that capacity, putting a lot of time and effort into reaching as many people as I can, as many people who would like me to reach them, to put some solutions in their minds and their hearts and their hands. And one of the primary ways that I've been doing this over the last couple of years is doing clinic tours. So I've been traveling around the world now for a couple of years and done a lot of work in that field in regards to clinics in the last couple of years. And most recently, I completed a world tour, went all the way around the globe. And 2 of those clinics, I was fortunate enough to have somebody with me who was willing and able to record the clinic from start to finish. You might think that that's easier than you think to do, but actually recording something and then uploading it and making it available is not easy to do. But I managed to do it. I had some friends filming. And this time I had some good sound. I had a little lapel microphone, so you can actually really hear everything that I'm saying. And it's taken us a while because I needed somebody to help me. But you can actually go and watch those clinics right now on my online school. So I have a section on my online school called Full Clinic Recordings. There is already 1 whole clinic published there. And 2 more clinics have now gone live in that area. And for a short time only, I am offering original entry level prices into the Full Clinics recording section. It's the prices of entry into watching 1 recording, but you're really getting 3 recordings for the price of 1. Each clinic is about 9 hours of recording, so that's about 18 hours per the 2 new clinics, plus over 6 hours from the first clinic that I've put there. So it's a lot of material, it's constant teaching, it's with the public, it's with people like you in a real life setting. So if you go to the link of the show notes here, I've given an access point to that if you're interested in having a look at it. And I hope to see you there. And also, if you join that area, you get access to one of my online spaces where you can discuss and share your journey and ask me questions directly about what you're watching and how you might be able to apply that to you in your case. Now, with that, let's get back to this episode with Shelby Dennis.
For yourself shouldn't come externally.
No, and no. So, if we're looking at change in the industry, Shelby, how do you imagine that can happen? What are some of the solutions that you would propose? And when it comes to methodologies and training, what sort of solutions are you proposing?
I think that it would be good to start mandating like equipment more, especially for things like show jumping or barrel racing. Like there's just certain equipment on the market for horses that should not be able to be legally sold, whether it's in competition or not. And I think that would be a good start, is just making it so that people cannot access weapons to use on horses as readily. And then I also think like restructuring competition in a way where it isn't so easy to be so wildly successful when you're taking shortcuts when it comes to ethics, because right now a lot of people view the success of certain riders as a sign that they are ethical because they're succeeding, but ethics aren't interwoven into the rule book to such a way that you can you can't get to those levels without behaving ethically. It's actually quite the opposite. So I think that my idea would be to encourage people to like, it's not about even convincing everyone to use rewards based methods. It's like, let's use less force and aggression. Like that is a realistic way to approach things, is if the horses aren't in such a chronically high state of stress where they're needing to be ridden in really aggressive equipment, or needing to have their mouths hauled off on, or needing to be spurred or whipped to do their jobs. That would be, but even if the horse still doesn't enjoy the sport, they're less stressed. And I think that harm reduction is the path forward. And in terms of getting there, I think that the more realistic way to try to pressure that change would be with the FEI, like their sponsors. If they start to lose sponsors and start to lose that public support because of what they're continually enabling, I think we'll see a quicker shift in the direction where they're changing their rule books and making things more accessible and more like having more accessibility to ethical treatment of horses if they lose that public support, because money talks. I think it's more about that than anything else, because I don't really think the change is necessarily going to come from inside the horse community. I think it's going to be the pressure of people outside that are looking in and viewing it that ends up resulting in the change. Because if you look at their sponsors, a lot of the sponsors are they're not marketing most of their clientele. Is It's not all horse people, like Longines, Rolex, and all these high-end brands. They're marketing their products to just rich people that aren't horse people. And sure, some horse people buy those products, but their target audience is not just within the horse industry. And I think that if those sponsors were to pull out, if change doesn't happen, it would be really effective.
I see there being space in horse sport to have a new judging component around, for example, the Sue Dyson's ridden pain ethogram. For example, I mean, a lot of people challenge her work as well, but something along those lines where there is a judge who's looking at your tempi changes and your half holds, but there's also a judge who's looking at conflict avoidance and conflict behaviors, and they're looking at signs of stress, and they're looking at these things with a fine-tooth comb and mandating how much can be present and how much couldn't. I would also like to see first enforcement of their own rule book first. That has to be the first step. Just the first step needs to be that. And then the second step and the third step and the fourth step needs to be a comprehensive remodeling of the welfare section of their own rule book, because it's rife with compound definitions. And a compound definition is enough for any lawyer in a court of law to put their hand up and say, I object. You can't actually continue that line. You can't actually continue that argument legally, because it's a compound definition that requires specific defining of what it is you're actually talking about. So, for example, they say, some dressage rule books will say things such as horses will maintain the manner of going in accordance with their submission to the aids. Well, define the aids, define submission, define manner of going. You need to actually define those things explicitly so that they can actually be judged properly. Because right now it is phrased in this jargony way, which actually gives all the power to the individual judge to interpret how they will. It's like typical bureaucracy. If you've ever tried to be an immigrant anywhere and immigrate somewhere, it doesn't matter what the nation's immigration laws are. It matters what your immigration officer in front of you interprets the laws as on that day at that time. I've certainly been that end of the stick. It's the same with judges. Judges are basically able to interpret it according to their own biases because the rule book makes these signs and symbols of no fear, no pain, but then it's enshrouded in this very woolly, compounded, poorly defined language, which actually
Yeah.
gives license to the judges to interpret it at their own free will, carte blanche. And
Yeah.
that's got to change. But that won't change soon. I don't even think it will change.
I don't think it will
I
either.
don't think it will change at all. If I'm keeping my standards within the realm of functional possibility, I would like to see that they enforce what they already have.
Yeah, that would be a nice change because it kind of, what's the point in having a rule book in the first place if you're not actually following your own rules? And like the welfare code of conduct, I in my opinion, it comes across as more virtue signaling than actually anything that's serving the purpose of being there for the protection of horses, because it's not enforced. And I brought that up. I sat down with the FEI director of Solidarity back in September 2023 at a welfare conference, and he referenced their welfare code of conduct as like, this is what we're doing to protect horse welfare. And then in my rebuttal, I was just like, okay, well, here's all of these recent circumstances where riders have broken that welfare code of conduct and won. So, like, what is the purpose of this welfare code of conduct in the first place? And he actually walked out during my speech because he didn't want to hear it. Because I was like, you're effectively gaslighting people by being like, hey, we have this here, and this is why we're doing our jobs. But then it's like, here's all the examples that you're not actually enforcing this to the degree that you're trying to claim. You're just trying to get people to look away from the issue and believe that there isn't one. Um, so I agree with you. I'm not really convinced that they're going to make like changes to the rule book. I think would be a difficult one. And then even if they did make changes, I would question whether or not those changes would be enforced if they can't enforce what's currently going on.
Well, I think with the right redefinition of some of their rules, it would be easier to enforce them and not give them so much wiggle room because they've given themselves wiggle room. Like anyone who creates a contract that's on the surface supposed to protect others but really looks after your own interests, at the end of the day, their welfare code of conduct basically looks after their own interests and allows them to interpret it in any which way they like. What I've learned is that the incongruence knows no boundaries. It really
Mm-hmm.
knows no boundaries. And I have a horse here at home who is from that world. Everything from his feet, to the tip of his tail, to the way he responds to people, to the way he conceptualizes work. Everything about him is of that world. And his former owner is deep in bed with the FEI. And we talk, and he wants to come here and show the horse's progress. And I've had to stop and think about that. I want him to see the horse, of course, but I've had to stop and think about if I want to appear on a platform that stands shoulder to shoulder with the FEI. I've had to stop and think about that. As much as he's had to stop and think about, do I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with someone who's critical of the FEI?
Yeah.
Right. And he's still willing to have a go. So credit to him. He's actually open minded, but I don't know if he actually realizes the depth and breadth of my concern of some of the people that they stand with. I know for a fact some of the people they stand with have engaged in active abuse of animals and people. I know of a pending court case about someone who committed suicide related to one of the people that
Oh,
they work
wow.
with. So it can be extremely specific, but when it comes down to it, they just want to look at the shiny dancing horses and the $1 million facilities and go, I don't know. It's just like horses as a style prompt for human aristocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tale as old as time. I certainly have no aristocratic bone in my body. Certainly don't. I might be bookish, but I'm not aristocratic. And my place is pretty rustic by any stretch of the imagination. But having a horse from that world at home, standing shoulder to shoulder with my scruffy mountain ponies and my little quarter horse, has been a really fascinating process to learn that the conditioning that those communities hold on to that keeps them stuck in these cycles of incongruence are also on their horses. And these horses have the same patterns, the same conditionings that require a lot of tact and nuance to undo. You know, first time he saw me sitting on the floor near him, he was very confused. He said, that's not allowed. That's not a,
Oh.
you're not supposed to be down there. Get up. What are you doing down there? You know, as much as he tells off my young horse for touching the electric fences, he tells him off and moves him away. But it's almost like he expects people to be a certain way. And when I don't track that certain way, he's confused.
And he
And
doesn't know what to do. He's
he doesn't
just
know what to do, but then he kind of learns that everything's okay. He learns that
Mhm.
everything's okay. And oh, there's this other option. And then he tries the other option and then he blows out and he says, oh, that's actually all right, you know? And if a horse can change, then we can change. But
Oh, absolutely.
it's a big old mess, Shelby.
Yeah. It'll be a long path to change. So I think what you're saying about like how much is involved, like the elitism that's involved at the top of the sport and the conditioning, like it goes so far outside the horse world that like if you look around at like politics surrounding everything, because the horse industry is its own set of politics, and then a lot of the politics we see in the horse industry model that outside of it. And if you look at what the people who uphold certain values in the horse industry, where their social views go, it's usually in a lot of alignment where if they were to start to unpack how they look at horses, it would unravel other aspects of their life. And I don't think a lot of people are
Completely.
ready for that.
Completely. I mean, I almost spoke about it earlier. You said something to the effect of, you know, it's not personal. We're discussing what you're doing, not who you are. Uh, I don't think that's the experience of these people. If you discuss what they do, you're discussing who they are. That's how they see it. It's like they're
Yeah.
fully enmeshed. They've formulated their entire personalities around their spurs. Don't take them away. They've formulated their entire personalities around hauling on the horse's forehand, you know? And so if you pull that thread, they can become completely undone. And these people don't have a few, you know, push in the ground temporary fences that they just have to pick up and move somewhere. They're entrenched in these
Mm-hmm.
multi-million dollar facilities with employees and payrolls to keep going. And it's this whole beast and this capitalist machine they have to keep rolling forwards. Try and undo horse sport, you have to undo capitalism at the same time. It's
Yeah.
I don't I'm not saying I'm giving up hope. I'm just saying I don't know if it's worth my time and stress to take
No.
it on anymore.
I think that it's going to be something where it'll probably like what I if I'm looking at it realistically, what I think is going to happen is that they're going to just continue to dig their own grave, and it's going to hit a point where we have these big activist groups that come together and kind of force a shift. Especially as like the political fighting outside of the horse world builds and people get more and more unrest and they're more and more frustrated. I think that might be what forces a result on either side. But yeah, what you were saying where it's like so ingrained with who they are, I think that's like another layer of this where if you were to go, hey, actually I don't want to do this anymore, it would alienate you from your friends, your trainers, your colleagues. And like even if you just made the personal choice to be like, I'm not going to show in spurs anymore because I think it's wrong, other people would be so triggered by that that you would end up getting pushed out of the groups and like the communities that you found, and then you have to navigate making those changes alone, and that's really scary.
And I want you to know, Shelby, that that's not only happening in that community, it happens in ours also.
Yeah.
In our community, it's sometimes worse. The minute you put your head above the parapet and say, hey, I know we're supposed to be the ones who are innovative and change making and doing the ethical thing, but I've actually got a problem with this thing we think is ethical. I've discovered a problem with it. What can occur there is sometimes even worse, even
Oh yeah.
worse. I mean, that's certainly been my experience. But it's I mean, it's not alarmist or extremist in my view to say that it is highly possible that horse sport is facing its own demise. If we think about the use of animals in circuses, that all we needed was a couple of good Netflix documentaries about elephants in circuses, and that all came tumbling down. All we needed was one documentary called Blackfish to bring SeaWorld to its knees around captive
Mm-hmm.
cetaceans, captive orcas in the wild after one of the best positive reinforcement trainers in the world got eaten by her best whale. Eaten.
Yeah.
lunch.
I think that a Blackfish style documentary of horse sports would be the final nail in the coffin.
That's what
If
I think
people,
so
yeah.
too. That's what I think so too. I think that's basically what it's going to take. If we get the right documentary made in the right way at the right time on a platform like Netflix,
Yeah.
watch it
Goodbye.
all come tumbling down.
Oh, for sure. I think, and it would be very easy to make it as much like, because I think in a lot of ways, horses are more expressive in their emotions than whales are.
That's
And
right.
I think you could capture clips that are a lot more sad looking to the average person than
Right.
what we saw. And Blackfish was still horrible to watch. Like it was very sad, but it's the weaving, the cribbing, like all of the stall vices and stuff. If you're walking through a barn and every horse in that barn is lunging towards the camera crew, trying to bite them, or they're doing some type of stress behavior, you don't even really need to explain the context of that for people outside of the horse industry to see it and go, holy cow.
In fact, I think what we're actually going to require is that this change comes from outside the horse industry. What we actually require is the uninitiated with clean eyes looking at it and saying, oh, the emperor has no clothes. That's what we need. Because if we keep presenting a clean, logical arguments to our own fellow horsemen, we're not going to be getting clean, logical replies because we're just too personally enmeshed with our practices, with our horse culture, and with our horses. It's just too personal. We need people who don't own horses, don't know much about horses to kind of look at the right information presented in a proper structured way to actually go, oh, that's rubbish. And then you'll start the external activism that'll take it all away. We have historical precedents for it. All it took was for COVID-19 to come around, and the Spanish government in one afternoon went across a piece of paper, and riding is now forbidden for anyone who's not affiliated with the Spanish Riding Federation. Forbidden.
Oh, wow.
Forbidden in one afternoon.
Wow.
One afternoon, and it was being enforced. The Guardia
Wow.
Civil, which is the leftover of Spanish fascism, the police force, but that's where it came out of. They were patrolling country roads, looking into the fincas and the land to see if anyone was riding horses and issuing €600 on the spot fines if you were seen
Wow.
riding a horse and you were not paying into the Spanish Equestrian Federation. To pay into the Spanish Equestrian Federation means you have to be competing or breeding or
That's
working horses
crazy.
as livestock. So you actually needed to ride the horses as part of your agricultural duties in the mountains or something. And I was living in the mountains at the time. And so I didn't ride for 3 months because it was illegal. In one
That is
afternoon, it
so
was made
crazy.
illegal. I could only do groundwork for 3 months. That's when I filmed my first online course. I did ride on foggy days when the fog obscured the road above me, though, because it was in the mountains, they could look in. So we have historical precedents. It took one afternoon for the right person to say, we're taking all extreme sports off the table. In specific, looking at the equestrian world, we're taking horse riding off the table because it's an extreme sport and it's overburdening our already burdened hospitals. And we can't have people exposing themselves to unnecessary risk if we need to
Wow.
create space in hospitals for people. So it's not alarmist, and it's not even sort of weird wacko R2D2 future stuff to say that this could happen. It's happened before. It's happened in the past. It's happened recently. And all of the framework is actually there to put a line through it and say, this is done. I think America might be a little bit more tricky because of their state system and their
Mm-hmm.
relationship to individual freedom. But in other countries,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's alarmist at all. I think it's kind of just reading the room and being aware of the fact that, like, hey, like, this is the direction things could be heading and
well, it's the
being
direction things
mindful.
are heading.
Yeah.
They are heading that way. And
Yeah.
this won't be swept under the rug.
No, I think we're at the point where it can't be swept under the rug anymore because so many people are seeing it. And also, people haven't really made much of an effort to hide what they're doing in sports. So, and they still aren't, despite the external pressure that we're
Now
already
they are.
seeing.
Now they are. I was watching the FEI social media very carefully during the Olympics. Preceding the Olympics, they were putting some photos up where everyone was like, do you see the top line on that horse? Do they have eyes? Who's controlling the socials here? Is no one looking at this? Like, what's going on? And they caught wind of it. And overnight, they started changing their tune. You could not find a post of a horse behind the vertical. You could not
Yeah.
find a post where the person wasn't smiling and petting the horse
Yeah, and they
affectionately.
were taking at them at certain angles, I noticed, for the dressage
That's right.
tests.
That's right. That's right. So they are going to try their very, very best to sanitize it, Shelby.
Yeah, yeah. At the Olympics, I did notice that too, where they were taking lots of photos of the riders hand grazing their horses and walking them themselves. When usually it's the grooms that do that. Because I've talked to a few other people who are often at those competitions to ask about that, and I think it's interesting how just at the Olympics, it's like suddenly we're seeing these riders individually spending so much time with their competition horses when typically this is like what a groom would be spending time doing. Um, but it's very interesting because in like in FEI sports, I've noticed it more, but the level of like pride that some people will post photos that do not look good or videos that like barrel racing is a great example for that, where like there's not really any other horse sport I can think of, like even regular horse racing, though there's more whipping laws in place, but where you can just repeatedly flog your horse with the whip and be kicking the crap out of them and have that be acceptable in competition. And I think that that's going to end up being a major problem pretty quick because it's just something that is so overtly not okay that I think it'll be hard to find people that'll defend that are not within that insular community.
There's a like fetishization of pain and suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's rugged individualism and sort of resiliency and sort of go get 'em attitude, which, that's deeply entrenched. That's not going anywhere. We're never going to shift that. People are going to barrel race, Shelby, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what we
Oh
do, that
yeah.
they're just going to do it. People are going to
Even if
do
they
these things.
banned it, they would go under the table, like under,
That's right.
yeah.
Like cockfighting,
Mm-hmm.
it would become an underground thing, and then it would be even worse. If it's out in the
Yeah.
open, maybe we could regulate it.
Yeah, it would be nice to see it regulated, even if they just did something similar to what show jumping does, where it's like you can't hit your horse more than 3 times consecutively, which I mean, I would argue you shouldn't be
It's a
hitting them
low bar.
anyways.
It's a low
Yeah, it's a
bar, but
very low bar,
at least it's a
but it would be
bar.
better. Yeah. Because right now I've started counting how many times they're hitting those horses, and I someone pointed out to me on one of my comment sections where they're like, well, Charlotte Dujardin was whipping her horse like 24 times behind the scenes in training, and it just happened to get caught on video, and then she got a 1 year ban. But then it's like in other sports, people can hit more than that in the span of 30 seconds or less during a barrel run, and it's acceptable. So there's a lack of cohesion between the disciplines with what is allowed. And I think that's going to end up becoming an increasing problem because people are going to feel like it's unfair to them if they're getting held to a way higher standard than other
That's right.
people who are doing similar things.
That's right. And it will increase the division these people have. And it's all about costume and aesthetic, right? I'm wearing these clothes and having this equipment, and you're looking like that, and I'm looking like this, and we are not like each other because our horses are different, and we dress differently, and we ride differently, and to try and get those two things to come together with some sort of overarching, I don't know, I don't see it happening. So I'm sort of put my focus elsewhere. But I really respect how motivated you appear to be to continually take this on. I think I've got balls, and then I go and look at your social media, and I'm like, compared to Shelby Dennis, I am timid.
Well,
Timid.
thank
You are
you.
brave. You know that, right?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I try to be. I think for me, like it's it's complicated because it's not just related to like what I see in the horse world. Like I feel like I have a duty to speak against these societal paradigms because with what I've watched with horses and then the more I've looked into like the politics behind what we're seeing and like certain mindsets that are just becoming entrenched that are devoid of empathy, it reminds me of what I would learned and what I was told by like people on my dad's side because like my dad is black, so their whole side of the family is black. And if you go look back, slavery wasn't that long ago. And a lot of the same attitudes were used to justify slavery, where it was like, oh, this doesn't impact you. It's none of your business. This is just the way things are. It doesn't matter. We take care of them. We treat them well. We feed them, whatever. And like, obviously, people and horses are very different, but I see that there's a lot of the same excuses that are being recycled to justify certain things that are not okay. So for me, it's more personal in the sense that I speak out against those things because I would rather go out with a hoarse voice from speaking too much and say my piece, then have to continue watching these things happen. And it like I'm shifting the way I'm going about it because it is definitely emotionally exhausting because I would say the hardest part is seeing the horse abuse, but then also seeing people show the face of their other societal views where they just really do not care about marginalized groups of people at all. And that's really troubling. So it's kind of a twofold thing where it's like my social views kind of go hand in hand with like the horses, and the horses are more of like a special interest way of addressing an issue that is the same issue.
Show me your horses and I'll tell you who you are.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, animals in general, I think they're mirrors for what we're willing to work on in ourselves and how we show up for people too.
It's important work, and I wish you all the very best with it. I have 3 questions I like to ask my guests to finish these episodes. Might I ask them?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, they kind of encapsulate what we've been talking about already. First one is I'd like you to muck out with me. What's one thing, as many, but what's one thing in the equestrian industry that makes you say, what the muck? And you would like to just lift it up and compost it out and never see it again? What's one thing?
Excessive stalling, easy. That would be one where I think if we got rid of
Straight away.
stalling horses too much, it would solve a lot of the problems that cause people to do more unethical things.
Love it. I'll join you on that. I'll muck out again the seraton. You know what the seraton
Oh
is,
yeah,
right?
I hate those. Yeah,
So
awful.
my local tack store, local, it's an hour's drive away, but it's between me and the airport. So anytime I've got guests and I go to pick them up from the airport, I always stop. It's got a great selection, got a bit of everything, and there's a little corner full of seratons. And
Oh,
they're listed in the pre-euro currency, I think pesos. They're listed in a totally, so no one has touched them for like decades. They're just
and they're
there.
still there.
And they're
Yeah.
still there, man. And I'm trying to build enough rapport with the people who work in that store that one day I'll spend enough money there that they'll listen to me. That I'll go up and just point to them and say, "Listen, I'm bringing some international clients here, and we stop at this tack store on the way to my farm, and can we just take some of these down?" And some of them are really extreme. I've been in other tack stores in Andalusia in the south of Spain, where I remember seeing what I assume was a father and son standing at the desk with the clerk, and they had several seratons out on the table, all of them uncovered, so not wrapped in leather. These are just raw
Oh,
serrated iron. And they were having a conversation in Spanish where they were comparing in nuanced detail the pluses and minuses of different models and what this model will do for you and what kind of lightness you'll get with that model and what kind of horse is best for that model. And they were discussing it the way you and I would discuss like wall paint colors.
yeah.
And
That's so
it's
wild.
so entrenched in family dynamics, in tradition. I mean, the Spanish and their traditions, it's very, very tough. I mean, I don't know of any other, let's say, Western country where the horses are exposed to traditional practices that are so medieval. And not only
Mm-hmm.
practices, but care. Spain can be a really troubling place to be if you're a welfare minded horse person,
Yeah.
including for Spanish people who see these things too and want to change it. It's very, very tough. I'd muck all
Yeah.
that out. Well, next question is all about this tide of change we're undergoing. You can answer it in 2 ways. How would you define this tide of change in our industry? And or how are you contributing to it?
Okay. I would say I would define this. It's kind of like the way I would look at it historically is it feels like the lead up of resistance and general discourse before what would hopefully end up being a renaissance period where we have entered a new light and there's a new way of thinking and we're starting to adopt different practices and really alter like enter in an enlightened stage of consciousness on a massive scale. And I'm hoping that that's what this is going to lead to, whether that is the end of competition and forcing people to learn how to like their horses when they're not using them for that, or if it's changing the parameters of competition. I think that we're in a stage where there's going to be a lot of unrest and fighting and general discomfort before we hopefully hit a point where it'll get a little smoother and more comfortable, and we'll start to see big shifts happening, because I think it's happening on a worldwide scale outside of the horse world as well. And it's just a matter of like, what direction are we going to turn? Like, what is this get, we're building pressure. What is this going to burst and lead into? And with regards to how am I contributing, I'm just trying to share my story and what I've done and like my musings and thoughts on things, and trying to encourage a higher degree of accountability for people that are in elite level horse sports. And other than that, it's like ultimately, it's like, here's what I'm putting out into the world on my page. If you don't like it, block me, ignore me. If it triggers you, I hope that you examine why that is. And like likewise for myself, because I noticed that I get more triggered by certain things when people really double down and they defend harmful things. It's been hard for me to sit with, and I've been having to deal with that too, because I think that part of it is that, like, to rectify the wrongs that I've committed, it's like sharing this story and having to try to push for change in order to fix that. And it can be triggering when you're met with such huge resistance and people just boldly defending harmful rhetorics. But ultimately, it's like, I just want to say my piece, because if people don't like what they have to say, what I have to say, unlike their horses, they can just block me and move on and never have to see my face again. Horses are stuck in the situations that they're in.
Thank you. Thank you. My last question is all about home. Do you have a definition of home that is unique to you? And I don't necessarily mean where you park your car and make your food and make your bed. I mean, what is something that is true, comfortable, peaceful for you that you return to? No matter what you learn, no matter who you visit, there's always a place where we return to where we have the most space to be ourselves, to go and learn something new. What is home for you, Shelby?
For me, home isn't a physical place, because I've moved around a lot and like I'm also renting right now. I think I could build a home in a place once I've really felt settled. But for now, I always reference feeling like a potted plant where I haven't been able to put roots down because I'm moving around a lot. But I would say I found home in myself, like in my mind, and it hasn't always been that way. It's a more recent thing the last 2 years, where I feel at home in myself and knowing who I am and knowing what I want, knowing what my morals are. And then there's also people that I've found a home, and also animals. Like my horse that I've had the longest, Milo, I found home in him because I know I know his likes and dislikes. He knows me. We read each other really well. I don't find him to ever be unpredictable or anything like that, because he's just so clear in his communication, and it's just like effortless. And then with people, like someone like my mom, she's been a huge inspiration to me, and she's really helped me through a lot of things, and she's home embodied in a person. So I find home in certain people and animals. Also, home to me on a collective scale is here in the Pacific Northwest. I love it here. I wake up every day, it's clear, and I see the mountains. And when it's not clear, there's like the smell of the rain and the mist in the air, and it never ceases to be beautiful to me. Like, I just love it here so much. This whole geographic area of BC and the different types of mountains and how the landscape changes. It's just, if I could choose like a physical place for a home, I guess it would be here.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for sharing your morning with me today. Please
Yeah, thank
tell
you so much for having me.
please tell the lovely listeners where they can find you, connect with you, train with you. I know you have a bunch of merch out that's really
Yeah.
fun. Where can they find you?
So I'm on TikTok, Instagram as SD Equus. That's just SDEQUUS. And then Facebook as Milestone Equestrian. I also have a website, milestoneequestrian.ca, that I have a resources page on. And then I'm also on Patreon for behind the scenes tutorials and whatnot. And that's just patreon.com/SDEquus. And I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook, so that's where people can find me most easily. And then my shop pages for like the apparel, the merch, the bridles, etc., is just shopmilestoneeq.com. And all of that's easily linked on my pages, and they can check out my work there.
Wonderful. Shelby, thank you so much. Is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you?
No, I think you covered a lot of the stuff that's the most meaningful to me. So nothing comes to mind as is. And I'm looking forward to interviewing you next week on my podcast. I think that'll be a lot of fun because
I'm looking forward to it.
you have a very interesting story, and I loved having you on last time as well.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to it. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Okay, so you've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I was your host, Lockie Phillips, and that was my guest, Shelby Dennis of Milestone Equestrian. I hope you loved it. If you'd like to take advantage of access to see the full clinic recordings, which is how I show people in an introductory way the solutions that I might be able to offer you going forwards in a real live setting. It's not staged, it's not produced, it's just me teaching real people at a real clinic. You can go to the show notes of this episode and you can find it there, or you can go to emotionalhorsemanship.com, navigate to the online courses page and click for full clinic recordings. That's full clinic recordings. And if you'd like to learn more about Shelby Dennis, go to milestoneequestrian.ca, or you can go see her on all social media at Milestone Equestrian. She's very active there. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.